Hello Unreal Engine games developers, and congratulations on reaching the final episode of this desert driving multiplayer game series. Today we're going to be creating a front end to host and join the game, and finally packaging and building the game for everybody to play. Welcome to the final official video of this desert driving game series, and today we're going to do two things. We're going to create the simplest front-end menu to host and join the game, and then we're going to package and build the game so that you can deploy it to anybody who wants to play it. Now, creating the front-end menu, you can spend a long time creating a lobby and chat windows. I've seen 20-part series just in creating that, but we're going to create the absolute basic menu for hosting and joining the game. So let's start off by doing that. Go to your maps folder, and in add imports, go to add level, and we'll call this level main menu. And in this main menu, let's open it up, save it first. We want to create a game mode and a player controller for this level. So let's start off, go to your player folder and do new blueprint class, and we'll start off by creating a new game mode. So click game mode base, and we'll call this BP main menu game mode, and we'll also create a player controller for this main menu as well. So right click, blueprint class, player controller, and we'll call this a BP main menu player controller. Okay, and we've got the main menu open, so in the world settings for this level, choose this main menu game mode, and for the player controller, choose the main menu player controller. Okay, so we've set up the basics of this main menu level. So the first thing we want to do is create a widget with the buttons to host and join the game. So go to your UI and create a new user interface widget blueprint, which we'll call W main menu. Open it up. And in here, we're going to create a vertical box of buttons for hosting the game, joining the game, and quitting. So go to your panels and drag in a vertical box into your canvas panel. And then let's drag just one button in to start off with. We'll get that set up and then we'll duplicate it. So go to buttons, drag that into your vertical box. And let's first of all take the vertical box and let's anchor that to the center. You can press Control and Shift while you're doing this in order to get everything centered in that position. Do size to content as well. And now with our button, let's set up centered. Actually, let's put in a text widget in that as well. And text block, put in our first text item, host game. Let's do a bit of padding around there. And what we want to do is just change the color. I want sort of a blue color for the button. So go to back to the button, and in the style, we've got normal, hovered, and pressed. Let's click on normal first to actually open it up. And tint here, I want to make a light blue. Let's do that. Click OK. And then we want to do similar sort of thing for the hovered and pressed. So let's just copy and paste into the hovered and pressed, and what we'll do is we'll make the hovered, we go to the color, make it slightly lighter, and for the pressed we'll make that slightly darker. So that's our sort of our button profile, if you like, that we'll copy for the other ones. Let's call this button host game. Come over here and Control C, Control V twice. We've got 2 more buttons. We'll call the second one button join game, and in the text the join game, and the last one we'll call a button quit, and text to quit. Let's do some padding as well. So put padding of 20. That looks about right. Let's do the same thing on the other 2 buttons. Padding of 20. Okay, so those are our 3 buttons. So let's put a title for the game as well. So again, just drag the text in to the vertical box, line it to the center, use these arrows to move it up, and let's call this game Dune Bashing. Make it a lot bigger in size, 120, and let's change the color to some sort of sandy color. Okay, so we've got our title, we've got our 3 buttons, but we haven't attached any code to these buttons yet. So that's the next thing we want to do. Let's pick the host game button and add an on-clicked event. So when somebody clicks the host game, in fact, let me just get rid of these other 2 events that we don't need for cleanliness. When somebody clicks the host game button, we want them to create a session. So we'll drag out here and do create session. It needs to know how many connections are going to be allowed. Well, we'll allow up to 4 players to join each session, and we want to use the LAN, so we're only doing this for the local network at the moment. We need to put a player controller on this as well, so just drag out from here and do get a player controller, and that will be player controller 0, which is my player controller for multiplayer. And that is pretty much all I want to do for the host game button. Just create the session. We'll do a print string for failure for now. Again, I said this is going to be as simple as possible, and we'll just say create session failed if it doesn't work for whatever reason. Okay, and that is the host game button logic created. Do a quick compile and save, go back to the designer view. Let's choose our join game button. Again, on-clicked. So we created the sessions in the host game. If you want to join a game, we need to find what sessions are available and join one of them. So drag off here and do find sessions. It needs max results. It needs to be just 1 or more. We're only going to do this for 1 session, but let's just put 10 in here. It doesn't really matter as long as it's greater than 1. Again, player controller. We'll copy from here, Control W, and put that in the player controller. Make sure you tick use LAN. And if it doesn't work, if we don't find any sessions, again, we'll do a print string that says no games to join because nobody has hosted a game. But if there is a session, then we want to get that session and join it. So drag out for the results and do get a copy, and we'll use index 0, which is the first session. We're only interested in hosting one session and joining the first session in this simple menu. So get the session at index 0, and we want to join session. Actually, that should be from on success. So, join the session. The player controller is the same one we had here. And we want the session that we're joining to be this one that we got from the array of sessions, in fact, just the first one. And hopefully that will be all we need to do to join that session. The only thing we need to do now is say if it's on, if we can't join the session, let's do a print string that says failed to join session. Okay, now there's something we have forgotten to do in the create session, which is if I'm hosting the game, I want to open the level with the game in. So let's bring this down a bit. And what we want to do is we want to do open level by name. And we need to put the name in, let's expand this out, we need to put the name in exactly as it appears in the game. So if I go to my maps, the main menu is called Desert, capital D. So I will open the level called Desert. Absolute means it's going to reset any options from previous levels. And because this is the host of the game, I want to put option listen, all lowercase, which means it'll open this level as the listen server. So I will be the host and the server of that game. Let's do a compile and save. And now we have pretty much all we need for one player to host the game, create a session, and then the other players to join the game, and they should automatically be placed in that level as client. Let's finish off with the last button, the quit button here. So select that, unclicked, and here we'll simply do quit game. And again, it wants the player controller. And then the other preferences are set up correctly, so it'll allow me to quit the game. And believe it or not, that is all I need to do in order to create a menu that allows me to host and join the game. So we now just have to show this main menu in the player controller. So let's go back to our main menu level and find in the player folder our main menu player controller. Go to the event graph. We don't need a tick event. In the begin play event, we want to create a widget, which is our main menu. We then want to add it to the viewport. And there's one more thing we need to do, because we've got fields that we want to interact with. We need to have a mouse cursor. So if you drag off here and do set mouse cursor and say set show mouse cursor, we'll click that to yes. Now I might have to do this with the player controller. Let me just check that. If I do self, which gets the player controller, if I drag this out and a mouse, set mouse cursor widget. No, it's not that one. Set show mouse cursor is what you want. Yeah, and this makes sure it is for this player controller. So create the reference to self first and then set show mouse cursor. And that will make sure there is actually a cursor so we can click on our buttons. And make sure you set show mouse cursor to ticked so that it will show the mouse cursor. And compile and save. So that will make sure that when we load the main menu level, it shows the main menu widgets, and then we've put all the logic for hosting and joining the game. So there are two last things to do before we can test this. The first is that we need to make sure that this map, this level, is the one that's shown when we start the game. So go back to the main Explorer window, the project window, go into your settings, project settings, and go into maps and modes. So at the moment, you probably got your maps in the default map set to the desert map. Let's set the game default map to main menu. So that will be the one that is first shown, first loaded when the game starts. And close that down. Let's save everything by using Control Shift S. Make sure everything in the project is saved. And I said there's one last thing I want to do before I want to test this. I want to run this in a windowed mode so that I can run more than one game on this computer. So what I can do is in the blueprint section, open the level blueprint for this main menu. So this is something that happens when this map is loaded. And I'm just going to put in this temporary node here, which is execute console command, and the command I want to execute is r.setRes, capital S, capital R, and this sets the resolution. So I want to make it half HD, so that's 960 by 1080. And W means it runs in windowed mode rather than full screen mode. So I'll compile save that. So that will just make sure that when we load this level, we get it in a window rather than full screen. We'll take this out when we do the final build. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how we can test this game without even having to build it. If you go to the project folder and find the Unreal Engine game project, you can right click on it and launch the game directly from here. So let's launch it, and you'll see it'll launch in the windowed mode. Let's just put it to one side, and let me just show you. If you try and join the game without hosting it, it'll try and search for sessions for a short while. It'll fail, and it'll put out that print string failed to join session. So that's a quick test of that in the development mode. Let's create another version of the game, launch it again. And we'll put that on the right hand side. And let's start off by hosting the game. And you see it is opened at desert level as the server. We then go to the other client and we do join game. It will look for a session, and after a short while you should find one and join. And so now we have our two players in the game. So this has worked, except there's one thing that I think we need to add to this, and that is the player name. It's still using the default inbuilt player names. So let's come out of here, Alt F4 on both of those and go back to our project. So what we want to do is we want to add another field to our main menu. So go to your main menu widget. We want to add another field here where we can enter the player name and pass that to the level player state. So let's start off by adding a widget in here. So we want to put in an input field, a text box. So just drag that in and use the arrow to put it wherever you want. I'm going to put it in between the title and the first button. Going to center it and let's call it variable. Let's call it text player name, and let's put some hint text here. It says enter your name here, and it's a bit on the small side, so let's go into the font section and change the font size to 20, maybe 30 even. And maybe a little bit of padding as well, 10, just to make it look a bit more even. And compile and save. Now, don't worry about this weird thing here with the font. Because we're using the default font, it tends to reset. It'll work fine in the game, so don't worry about that. Just make sure you've got a text player name and it's a variable. And what we want to do is we want to store that somewhere that can be passed into the desert level. So now we need to think about where we're going to store this player name until we get to the desert level. Generally speaking, if I go back to the main menu, all of the network objects we've talked about, like game mode, player controller, game state, player state, they all only exist for the lifetime of a level. But there are two ways that you can pass things between levels. One is that you can use sort of save game slots and load game, but that's probably overkill for what we want to do with the player name. Luckily, there is another game object called game instance. Every game has a game instance, every client has a game instance, and it exists and persists for the whole of the game, even if you change levels. So that's where we were going to store our player name in the main menu, and then when we go into the game, we'll get that player name from the game instance and put it into the player state so that it's displayed on scoreboards. So the first thing we need to do is create a custom game instance. So let's do that in our player folder again. Right click and do new blueprint class and search here for game instance and select game instance here, and we're going to call it BP my game instance. And in order to make sure that this is used rather than the default game instance, we'll need to go into project settings, go into maps and modes, and down at the bottom of maps and modes is the game instance class we're using for this game. So we want to use BP my game instance that we've created. Come out of here, and now all we want to do, if you double click on the game instance, all we want to do is create a new variable. So we'll call it player name. And it's going to be a text type. So compile and save that. That's all we want to do here. We don't want to do any replication. We want each player to store their own player name in their game instance and then retrieve it from their game instance when we go into the desert level. So close this down. And now all we need to do is in the main menu widget, we want to put some code behind the player name text box to update that. So go down to the bottom, make sure you've got your player name text box selected, and click on text changed. And so what we want to do is we want to get the game instance, cast to BP my game instance, which is our new custom one, and here we want to set player name. And the player name we're setting is from our text box. Okay, so now what we've done is we've saved that player name in the game instance. Compile and save that. What we want to do now is in the desert level, when we start up, we want to get that player name and store it in the player state. So let's do that. We'll go back to our main project window, go to your maps, and load up the desert level. And here's our player controller, BP my player controller. So click to browse to there, open it up. And we want to do that at the start of the game. So as soon as we begin play and we establish we're a local player, we want to get the player name and store it here. So let's create a custom event in some empty space here. I'm going to create a custom event, which I'm going to call client set player name. We'll come back and fill it in a minute. So all I want to do is, after I've established I'm a local player controller, I want to call set client set player name. There, I'll tidy this up later on. So it's the first thing we're doing, and now I can go over here and fill this out. So this is executing on the client. I want you to think about the network side of here. We want to set the player name on the server player state so that it gets propagated out to all of the other clients. But the first thing we need to do is get the player name from the client that we stored. So let's get our game instance. Cast to my custom game instance. And we can get the player name. Okay, so that's the first thing. We're getting the player name that we stored from the main menu level. And now what we want to do is we want to store it on the player state in the server. So we need to create a server event. Let's do it under here. Do another custom event. And we'll call this server set player name. We're going to have an input field called player name. It's a text field. Now we're going to call it from the client. And pass in our player name that we retrieved from the game instance. Now, what we want to do in this server set player name is get the player state for this controller on the server and set the player name. Unfortunately, we can't do that in Blueprints, and it took me a while to figure this out. It's in a very obscure place. It's actually done on the game mode for some reason. There's a change name function, but that game mode change name function does make sure that it's propagated out to all of the server player states. So let us get the game mode. And from there, we can call this function change name. And Our new name is the one we're passing in. It's just being converted from text to string. We'll do a name change to force it, and the controller will be this player controller. So it's a reference to self. So this game mode change name will change the name for this player controller, and it will propagate it to the player state. So we've got everything we need. So we probably should just put all of this in a comment and say set player name. And that should work. Let's test it out. So let's go back to make sure everything's saved in your main menu. Go back to your project and right click, launch game. Put this to one side. Type in the name here and click on host game. Okay, that's promising. We've gone in and you can see that Jack has appeared as the player name here. Let's launch another game as a client. Put name in, and this time join a game, and after a short delay while it finds a session, goes in, but it hasn't put the right name in here. So let's do a quick bug fix, and we'll try and figure this out, and then we'll come back in a second. Okay, I'm back a few seconds later, and straight away I realised my mistake. If you look at our set player name functions, the server set player name, we actually forgot to set this to run on the server. If I do run on server here, execute on server, the reason it worked for the first player is because the first player was the listen server. But the second player, it ran this on the client and then tried to run this change name on the client as well. So now we've set this to run on server, this should now work correctly. So let's compile, save it, and let's go back to our project folder and let's try it again. Launch the game. First of all, it's the server. Put in a name, host game. Okay, and as before, it started the level with the right name. Let's launch another version of the game. Put in a name. Join game. Fingers crossed this time. Brilliant. So it's opened the level and you can see that both the server and the client have been informed of the change of name in the player state. So we've got everything ready to deploy. So the very final thing we'll do in today's episode is we will do a quick package and build of the game, which is actually a nice quick thing to do. So Alt F4 to shut down our games and go back to the project. So to package the project, let's just change a few settings. In a future episode, I'll probably show you how to optimize your build game, but we're just going to do the basics this time. So go back to your main level, go into your project settings and find the section to do with packaging. And I'm going to show you just a couple of things you'll want to set. The shared material should be ticked, but just check that. And then if you keep going down, the next sections you'll want to tick is cook only maps and create compressed cooked packages. Now normally you'll also want to exclude editor content. I wouldn't advise doing it on this particular build because we did use a sound from the editor content. So in a future episode, I'll probably tweak that and move that into the main project. And then to stop it from building all the maps, we've got a lot of maps in this project that we're not using. So what we want to do is we want to list the maps we want to include in the packaged build. So click on Add here twice and click on Choose File, go to your Games folder, Content, Maps, and choose the main menu map. And then in the second array entry, choose your desert map. So this means that it will only put those maps into the final build and not put all the maps in there, the other maps in there as well, and inflate the package size. Okay, so that's all we need to do in here. Two things we want to do before we do the final build. We want to go into our main menu level. So open that up. Go into your level blueprint. So blueprints, open level blueprint. And now press Alt to detach that set resolution. Reason is we want to run the final game in full screen mode. This was just for testing. So if you ever need to come back and test it, we can reattach that. So compile and save. And then the final thing you want to do is, if you remember when in an earlier tutorial, we reduced the box size for the gate spawner, so we didn't have to drive very far to get to each gate. We want to expand that again now. So go to your desert map, open it up, edit the gate spawner, and click on the box collision. Gate spawner, we reduced it to 5,000 by 5,000. If you remember, the whole map was 45,000 by 45,000. That means the gates will spawn over a much wider area. So compile and save. And we are ready to do our build. So make sure everything's saved in the project and go to File, Package Project. And before you click on this to package it, check the build configuration. If you do a build configuration of development, things like our print strings and other console commands are available to you, but it makes the project a lot larger in size. So change that build configuration to shipping. Oops, might have pressed the wrong thing then. Package project, build configuration. No, I've pressed the right thing. Shipping, that's fine. And then once you've done that, package project, we're doing it for Windows 64-bit. Click on there. Click on your game project. It's up to you where you put it, but I tend to put a build folder within the project folder. So I'm in my project folder, right click and create a new folder, which I usually call build. Select that, and then you see it starting to package. You can show the output log, and for your first time building, this will take a while because it has to cook all of the map elements. That means compiling shaders, creating everything. So I'll come back in a minute or so and show you the final result. Okay, and actually this only took about 15 to 20 seconds or so. And you can see it says build successful. If you build it again, it'll be even quicker. So we can come out of here. Let's go to our project folder, and in the build configuration, we've got this folder called Windows No Editor, and that contains the game, executable, plus all of the supporting files. You can take this Windows No Editor and you can distribute that to anybody who wants to play the game. And now if I double click on this, it should open up my game in full screen. Put in the name, post the game, and there it opens up. And I've also tested this across my network, and when I join a game after I've posted one, it works successfully. So you'll have to trust me that that works. And we've reached the end of this series. but it's not completely the end. I'm going to do a couple more videos on some tweaks and bug fixes, and I'll also do the occasional video on add-ons to this game. I've got a few ideas for things we can add on that'll be useful to teach you. So please stay subscribed so that you see the new videos when they appear. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I've certainly enjoyed showing these techniques to you, and I'll see you again in the next one. Cheers for now.